I told my daughter that I absolutely do not support her only wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. My daughter Emma just turned 18 and graduated high school 2 months ago. Since she was about 15, she's been talking about how she doesn't want to go to college or get a job. She wants to find a husband and be a stay-at-home mom. Period. That's it. That's her entire life plan. At first, I thought it was just teenage talk like how kids say they want to be astronauts or YouTube stars. But she's been dead serious about it for 3 years now. No college applications, no job hunting, nothing. She spends most of her time watching these TikTok videos about traditional wives and reading blogs about homemaking. Last month, she came to me with what she called her life plan. She was going to live at home with me and my husband until she found a husband. She figured she'd meet someone at church or maybe through friends, marry them within a year or two, then have kids right away. When I asked what she'd do if something happened to her hypothetical husband, she just shrugged and said she'd move back in with us. I lost it. I told her that wasn't happening. If she wanted to live at home after graduation, she needed to either get a job or go to school, community college, trade school, something. She didn't have to get a 4-year degree, but she needed some kind of plan that didn't involve sitting around waiting for Prince Charming. She started crying and said I was being mean and that being a mom was a real job. I told her I wasn't saying being a mom wasn't work. But what happens if her husband dies or leaves or gets disabled? What if they can't have kids? What if he turns out to be abusive? She needed something to fall back on. That's when she dropped the bomb. She said her backup plan was literally me and my husband. If anything went wrong, she'd just move back home and we'd support her and any kids she might have. I asked what would happen if we died or couldn't help anymore. And she said, I don't know. Mom, this is ridiculous. None of it is going to happen. I told her she was being naive and that I wouldn't enable this fantasy. I said if she graduated and didn't have a job or wasn't in school by September, she'd need to find somewhere else to live. She could come back when she had a real plan. She ran to her room crying, and my husband came in asking what all the yelling was about. When I explained, he said maybe I was being too harsh. Emma's always been a homebody and maybe forcing her out wasn't the answer. But I stood my ground. The next day, Emma's grandmother called me screaming. Emma had called her crying about how I was kicking her out for wanting to be a traditional wife. My mother-in-law went on this whole rant about how back in her day, women didn't need careers and how I was being a terrible feminist mother for not supporting my daughter's choices. Then Emma's best friend's mom texted me saying I was wrong for not respecting my daughter's dreams. Apparently, Emma had been telling everyone I was forcing her to abandon her values and become some kind of career-obsessed woman who doesn't want kids. But that's not what I said at all. I never said she couldn't be a stay-at-home mom. I said she needed a backup plan, some kind of skill or education or work experience. Even just working part-time at Target would give her basic customer service skills and show her what it's like to earn her own money. The whole thing came to a head last week when Emma announced she joined some online matchmaking group for traditional wives. She showed me this website where women post profiles talking about how they want to be homemakers, and men look for wives who will stay home. Some of these women were 18, 19 years old talking about how they're looking for older men who can financially support them. Immediately, I told her she was basically looking for someone to take care of her like a child, not a partner. That set her off again. She screamed that I didn't understand her generation, that I was stuck in some second-wave feminist mindset, and that plenty of women choose to be traditional wives. My husband finally stepped in and said we needed family counseling. Emma refused. She said she'd rather move out than listen to some therapist tell her that her dreams were wrong. So, I told her fine, start packing. So, she slammed her door and started throwing clothes into a suitcase, while blasting music loud enough that I could hear it downstairs. And I stood in the kitchen shaking. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I realized this was actually happening. And I didn't know if I was about to permanently break my relationship with my only daughter. My husband followed her upstairs trying to calm her down, telling her nobody was saying she could never be a stay-at-home mom, just that she needed to slow down and think. But Emma yelled back that we were trying to control her life, and that she didn't ask to be born into a family that didn't respect her values. She called her grandmother again while packing and put her on speaker, and my mother-in-law immediately started telling Emma that she could come stay with her if we were going to be so cruel, that plenty of women had lived good lives without careers, that I was projecting my own regrets onto my daughter. I finally snapped and told her this wasn't about feminism or careers or control. It was about safety and reality. About not wanting my child to end up dependent on a stranger she barely knew because TikTok told her it was romantic. Emma screamed that I was insulting her intelligence and that I thought she was stupid, which hurt more than anything else she'd said. She dragged her suitcase downstairs and stood by the door, crying but still defiant, saying she'd go stay with a friend until she figured things out. I asked her which friend and she said it didn't matter, she'd figure it out, she always did. That's when it hit me that for all her talk about homemaking and tradition, she had never actually had to figure anything out on her own before. She left that night and didn't come home. The house felt wrong without her to quiet, like the air itself was heavier. The next few days were miserable. Emma barely answered texts, and when she did, they were short and cold. My mother-in-law posted vague things on Facebook about daughters being punished for their dreams, and how sad it was when mothers chose ideology over love. A couple of relatives liked and commented, and I felt like I was being publicly judged without anyone bothering to ask my side. My husband tried to stay neutral, but I could tell he was torn. And one night he admitted he was scared Emma would cut us off completely if we didn't soften our stance. I told him I was scared too, but I was more scared of watching her walk into something dangerous just to keep the peace. About a week later, Emma finally came over to grab more of her things. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and she wouldn't really meet my gaze. I asked where she was staying and she said she was bouncing between friends and her grandmother. And then she casually mentioned she'd been talking seriously with a man from that matchmaking site, someone in his early 30s who owned his own business and knew what he wanted. That was the moment my fear turned into something close to panic. I asked how long she'd known him and she said a few weeks. Mostly online, but they'd met once for coffee. And she said it like it proved she was being responsible. I told her that was exactly why I was so worried. Because wanting to be a stay-at-home mom wasn't the problem, but tying her entire future to a man she barely knew was. She rolled her eyes and said I was catastrophizing again. I asked her what would happen if he changed his mind, if he expected total control, if he left her with kids and no income. And she said those were negative what-ifs and she wasn't going to live her life in fear. I told her I wasn't asking her to live in fear. I was asking her to be prepared. She laughed bitterly and said preparation was just another word for not trusting people. That conversation went nowhere, and she left again. But this time I noticed she didn't slam the door. A few days later, I got a call from her in the middle of the night. She was crying, really crying, not angry crying, and she asked if she could come home just to talk. When she arrived, she admitted that the man she'd been talking to had started pressuring her to move faster, talking about marriage timelines, and how she'd need to stop listening to modern women and focus on pleasing her future husband. She said part of her knew it felt off, but another part of her felt like she couldn't back out without proving me right, and that scared her. I didn't say I told you so. I just hugged her while she cried and told her she could always come home to talk, to breathe, to think. We sat at the table for hours, and for the first time, she actually listened when I explained that having a backup plan wasn't a betrayal of her dreams. It was a way to protect them. I told her that if she still wanted to be a stay-at-home mom someday, I would support that, but I needed to know she could stand on her own feet first. By morning, we were both exhausted but calmer. She didn't magically change her mind about everything, but she agreed to at least look into part-time work or a short certification program, something that gave her independence without forcing her into a path she hated. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I know this argument isn't truly over. But for the first time since I told her to start packing, I felt like I hadn't lost my daughter, and that maybe, just maybe, setting that boundary had been the hardest and most necessary act of love I'd ever done. Story 2 at my ex-wife's wedding reception, her new family surrounded me. Why are you even here? Her brother sneered. She's moved on to a real man. They all laughed and pointed. But my 8-year-old son suddenly grabbed my sleeve. Dad, we need to go now. Something bad is going to happen. Trust me, Daddy. I nodded and started heading for the exit. Then, suddenly, it happened. Chapter 1, the invitation I should have ignored. I wasn't supposed to be here. The only reason I'd shown up to my ex-wife's wedding reception was because of our son, Liam. He had been asked to be the ring security boy, and despite everything between his mother and me, he wanted me to see him in his little black suit and sunglasses. The venue was a luxury banquet hall, chandeliers sparkling, a string quartet in the corner, and servers gliding between tables with champagne flutes. I kept to the back, hands in my pockets, trying to blend in. That's when they came. Her new family, the groom's brother, cousins, even the father, all circling like vultures. Why are you even here? Her brother sneered loud enough for nearby guests to turn their heads. She's moved on to a real man. Another cousin added, smirking. Then came the laughter, mocking, sharp, designed to cut deep. I stayed silent. Years of swallowing my pride had taught me that sometimes words were wasted on people who didn't want to hear them. Then I felt a small hand tug on my sleeve. It was Liam. His face was pale, his eyes darting toward the far side of the hall. Dad, We need to go now, he whispered urgently. Why? What's wrong? I asked, bending down. He swallowed hard. Something bad is going to happen. Trust me, Daddy. The conviction in his voice sent a chill through me. I nodded, my instincts screaming. I took his hand, started toward the exit, and then it happened. Chapter 2. The shattered. We were halfway to the glass doors when it hit. A deafening crack. For a split second, the entire reception froze. Then another crack and the sound of glass exploding overhead, as the huge chandelier above the main table came crashing down. Screams filled the hall. Guests of under tables, champagne flutes smashing against the marble floor. The chandelier's impact shook the room, sending silverware clattering and the quartet scrambling for cover. I turned just in time to see the twisted mass of crystal and metal lying exactly where the bridal party had been sitting moments earlier. Except my ex-wife and her new husband were still there. Blood, broken glass, the groom clutching his arm, his white suit splattered red. My ex's perfect hair tangled with shards of crystal. Security rushed in, followed by a few men in dark suits who clearly weren't part of the catering staff. They moved with military precision, scanning the ceiling, checking exits. Beside me, Liam clung to my leg, eyes wide. See? Daddy, I told you. Something in his voice wasn't just relief. It was knowing. And that's when I realized Liam hadn't guessed something bad would happen. He'd known. Chapter 3. Liam's secret. Outside, the winter air bit at our faces as I pulled Liam away from the chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, ambulance, maybe even fire trucks. I crouched down to his level, gripping his shoulders. Liam, how did you know that was going to happen? He hesitated, chewing his lip the way he did when he was afraid to tell the truth. Then his voice came out in a whisper. I heard them last night. Mom, her new husband, and some men I didn't know. They were in the kitchen. I was supposed to be asleep, but I got thirsty, so I went to get water. They were talking about how it would be poetic if you got her to the wedding. My heart froze. Me? What do you mean? Liam's eyes watered. They said they paid someone to make the lights fall during the toast, but they didn't know where you'd be sitting, and Mom's husband said, doesn't matter. If he's not there, maybe someone else will take the fall. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just been mocking me earlier. They'd been making sure I was in place. A slow, cold anger settled in my chest. I pulled Liam close. You did the right thing, buddy. But now Daddy has to do the right thing to dot in that moment. I knew I wasn't going to the police yet. This wasn't just going to be about justice. It was going to be about ending them. Chapter 4. Quiet moves. I dropped Liam off at my sister Cla's house before heading back toward the reception. Not to walk in, but to watch from a distance. Paramedics were loading my ex-wife onto a stretcher. She was wailing, not from injury, but from rage. Her new husband barked into his phone, pacing like a caged animal. The man in the dark suit from earlier stood beside them, scanning the crowd with the weariness of someone who had something to hide. I didn't need to get closer. I had enough to start. That night, I called an old friend, Marcus, ex-military, now working in private security. The kind of man who could find things the police wouldn't or couldn't. Need a quiet job? I asked. Depends, he replied. Is it legal? Not even a little. A pause, then a low chuckle. Send me the names. While Marcus began digging, I played the long game. I stayed silent, didn't post on social media, didn't talk to mutual friends. I let them think I was either too scared or too humiliated to act. Meanwhile, Marcus uncovered everything. The groom's gambling debts, my ex-wife's offshore account in the Cayman Islands, the contractor they'd hired for the chandelier job, a washed-up stunt rigger with a rap sheet longer than my arm, and the most interesting piece. They'd used the groom's company funds to pay him. That last one was gold. Because the groom's company wasn't just some small firm, it was a government contractor. The kind that couldn't afford even a whiff of scandal. Chapter 5. Setting the trap. The key to revenge is patience and the element of surprise. Marcus' intel was a goldmine, but I didn't want to just hand it to the police. I wanted them to destroy each other. Step 1 was planting seeds. I sent an anonymous package to the groom's company's compliance department. A neat little folder with copies of offshore wire transfers, casino surveillance stills, and an invoice from our chandelier contractor. The cover letter review immediately possible embezzlement and fraud involving government funds. Step 2. I went after my ex-wife directly. From a burner phone, I texted her a single photo. Her Cayman account balance page. Underneath it, I typed, I know everything. You'll be hearing from them soon. Step 3 was my favorite. Marcus arranged a chance meeting between the chandelier contractor and one of the groom's business rivals. A man who loved nothing more than watching others implode. A small payment and the promise of immunity, and our rigger was suddenly eager to talk to everyone. By the time the wedding video went online, complete with the chandelier crash, local reporters were sniffing around. The contractor sang like a bird to cover his own skin, and his first line to the press was, "They paid me to make sure someone got hurt." The dominoes were falling exactly where I wanted them, and I was just getting started. Chapter 6. Public collapse. It started on a Tuesday morning. The groom's company's front doors were plastered with a giant under federal investigation notice. 2 unmarked SUVs idled out front. Inside, agents and windbreakers carted out boxes of files and hard drives. By noon, the story was everywhere. Local businessman under investigation for fraud, money laundering, with a blurry still image from the chandelier crash looping on every news channel. My ex-wife's face was in it, screaming, caught mid-fall, eyes wide with fear. She called me blocked number, but I knew it was her from the tremble in her voice. "You did this. You think you're clever, but you've ruined everything." I stayed silent for a beat, then said, "No, you ruined everything. I just made sure everyone saw it." Her new husband was arrested a week later. She wasn't charged at first, but when investigators traced her Cayman account and found the missing funds, the cuffs went on. Meanwhile, I filed for full custody of Liam, with both of them facing felony charges. The court didn't just grant it. The judge said I was the only stable guardian in this child's life. The last time I saw her was in court, shackled, makeup gone, eyes hollow. She mouthed something at me. Maybe please, maybe sorry. I didn't respond because in that moment I realized the real revenge wasn't the investigation, the headlines, or even the arrests. It was walking out of that courtroom hand in hand with my son, knowing she would never hurt us again. Epilogue, the lesson. Months later, life felt normal again. No whispered insults from her family. No pretending for appearances. Just me and Liam rebuilding. We moved to a quieter neighborhood. I got him into a better school, one with a music program he loved. He started playing the guitar every evening on the porch, the same way I used to play for him when he was little. The case stayed in the news for a while. Her ex-husband took a plea deal, and she got 3 years for fraud and conspiracy. The night the verdict aired, I didn't feel the rush I thought I would. It wasn't victory, it was closure. One afternoon, Liam asked, "Dad, was it worth it doing all that?" I looked at him and said, "Son, sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure they can't hurt you or anyone else ever again." He nodded, strumming a soft chord. And for the first time in years, the air around us felt light. In the end, I didn't just win. I got my life back. I got my son back. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you think about this story in the comments below. Like the story. If you think the story is justified, share it with someone who needs this energy, and subscribe to Lauren's Story for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice. Because here, every lie has its reckoning and every betrayal finds its shadow.